Hello, today's lesson is all about the structure of DNA. So in this lesson, we're going to be learning how to describe the genetic material found in a cell. And hopefully by the end of the video, you should be able to define what a chromosome is, what genes are, and what DNA is, and to be able to describe the structure of that DNA. So to begin with, I'd like to do a quick recap of some key ideas that hopefully you all know already. So first of all, I'd like you to look at these two pictures that we have here. Now, these are diagrams of cells. Now hopefully you've recognised already that one of them is an animal cell and one of them is a plant cell. Do you know which one's which? Okay, so this one here is a plant cell and this one here at the bottom is an animal cell. So what I'd like you to do is to have a think about those two questions in the blue boxes. So where would you find the genetic material in these cells? So have a look at their structures. Where would you find genetic material? And then once you've done that, how many other parts of the cell could you name? So pause the video now and have a think about what the answers to those questions might be. You could sketch these out and then label them in your book, or you could just look at the images on the screen and have a think about where you would put the labels. Pause the videos now. Okay, so hopefully you've all had time to look at that. So where would we find the genetic material? Well, we have these structures here, and this is called a nucleus. And this is where you would find the genetic material in this cell. And if we look closely at the plant cell as well, there is a similar structure. Now there's a nucleus present in all plant and animal cells. Okay. So what other things could you label on your cell? Again, hopefully you identified this line here on your animal cell. This is our cell membrane. And this controls what enters and leaves the cell. You might have also identified what these red structures here are. Now, these are called mitochondria. Now, these are really important to cells because this is where respiration happens. And if you think back to what you might have learned lower down at school, respiration is the process that we carry out in our cells to produce our energy. So it's needed by all cells. On the plant cell, there are a couple of extra labels that aren't on the animal cell. So you might have labelled the cell wall. And this is made from a substance called cellulose. And you might have also identified these little green blobs. Now these are called chloroplasts. Now these aren't present in our animal cell. And you think why that might be? Why might an animal cell not want a chloroplast? Well, chloroplasts are where photosynthesis takes place, and animals don't photosynthesize, they don't need them. So now we've recapped some of our prior knowledge, let's get on to our new learning for today. So DNA. On this slide, there is a diagram. It looks like a pretty complicated diagram, but actually if we look closely, there's not too much to it. There are 4 labels in the blue boxes: chromosome, nucleus, DNA, and gene. What I'd like you to do is to study that blue box and the diagram that's in it. And I want you to think, which one of those do you think might be the chromosome, which might be the nucleus, where's the DNA, and where do you think the gene might be? So could you pause the video now to have a go at that? If you would like a little bit of extra challenge, there's another question for you to do underneath, which is to put them in size order from smallest to largest. So chromosome, nucleus, DNA, and gene. Pause the video now and have a go at those tiles for me. Okay, hopefully everyone's had a go at that. So I'm going to start with the biggest one, the nucleus. So this structure here is our nucleus. This is found in the plant and animal cells like we just spoke about, and it's where all the genetic material is stored. So the purpose of this activity is to figure out what that genetic material is. So if we look closely at our diagram of the nucleus, inside it you can see there's these little tiny structures, and these are our chromosomes. There's one of them there, but you could have also labelled all the little ones inside. So they're the chromosomes. Now, if you were to unravel a chromosome, you would find that it was made of DNA. It's a bit like unraveling a ball of wool. So your DNA label is going to go there. So the DNA is actually a really long molecule that's just wrapped around. Okay, and then if we look at the side, we can see here there are some little areas where it looks like a label might need to go. Now, we've already used the word nucleus, we've used the word chromosome and DNA, and that just leaves us with the word genes. So the word genes goes here. And if we look, we can see that the gene isn't a big bit of the DNA, but it is a section of the DNA. So if we start with the biggest one of these, we have the nucleus, and we go to the chromosome, and then we have a gene, and then that's made up of the DNA. Okay, well, if you'd done the question the other way around, you might start with DNA and then move up to nucleus. Okay. So there you go, there's a much neater version of that diagram, all nicely labelled for you. If you would like to, you could pause the video now and make a copy of that diagram for your notes. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in on that DNA and we're going to focus on that. We're going to have a look at what's going on with that structure. So on this page, we've got some really important key points. So let's first of all have a look at this diagram. So here's our chromosome that we spoke about before. And then we can see in this diagram it's being unravelled to show this bit here, to show the bit here that is spiralling round. That is our DNA. And if you imagine it to be a bit like a twisted ladder, so it's a twisted ladder. If you've got a ladder like that and you were to twist it round, that's what DNA looks like. And if we focus in a little bit more closely, we can see if we follow the blue line, there's a strand that spirals round and then there's another strand that spirals round. So actually it is made from two strands. And that's a really key point about understanding the structure of DNA. It is made from two strands and they form this special shape called a double helix. Now I've done that in a different colour to make it stand out because it is so important. Whatever questions you might be asked in the future about DNA, double helix usually forms most of the answers. So what's the structure of DNA? Well, it's a two-stranded double helix. I'll always get you marks in questions. So it's made from two strands that form a double helix. And the box below is just reiterating what we already know. The DNA is contained in structures called chromosomes that are found in the nucleus of the cell. So again, you can pause the video if you would like to make a few notes at this point. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is just to focus in on that shape. So we already know that there are two strands. I'm going to do a blue strand and a red one. And they spiral around each other. Now if I was to unravel that, I'm just going to draw a few lines on here first of all before I do that. If I was to unravel that strand, I would see that it looked a bit like a ladder. So if I'm going to do one strand here, and then I'll do the red one opposite. Please excuse my terrible drawing. And so our DNA is essentially a ladder made from two strands. Now there are some key bits to these strands. I'll do this bit in green. So down the side of it we have what's called a backbone, and that's made from sugars and phosphates. That's a sugar phosphate backbone, and that's on both sides we have a backbone. And then in the middle, on these rung parts of the ladder, we have a special type of chemical called a base. And the bases are what make us who we are. So I'm going to talk about the bases for a few more minutes to help you understand why they're so important. So DNA is made up of these things called bases. And there are 4 different bases. And we use letters to represent what they are. They have got really long names. They're actually called adenine, thymine, cytosine and guanine. But you don't need to know that. A, T, G and C is all you need to remember. There are 4 different bases that we would find on our ladder. So if I just draw another little ladder here for you, if we were to have a look, you would find these bases down there. And the order of the bases that you have determines who you are. This is the genetic code. And different characteristics will have different orders of the bases. So you might have A, T, C. Then somebody else might have A, T, G. And that one letter difference might make the characteristic that you and the other person have very, very different from each other. Now actually I've simplified that quite a lot by just drawing 5 letters there, because actually quite often the genes are several thousand bases long, not just 5. Okay, so there are 4 bases, A, T, G and C, and we would find these on our DNA strands. Now, in understanding the structure of DNA, there's something really important that we have to notice about how the bases are arranged on the 2 strands. So have a look at this diagram that's on this page now. So this is just showing us our DNA double helix, so the shape that we've spoken about. And all I've done is I've just popped on there some of the bases so you can see where they are. And I want you just to see if you can spot any patterns. Do you spot any patterns with what A might be paired up with, or what T might be paired up with, or G or C? So pause the video for a minute and just see if you can spot the pattern. Okay, well, hopefully everyone's figured it out from looking at the diagram. And A is always paired up with a T. Therefore, T is always paired up with an A. And G is always paired up with C. And C is always paired up with G. And that is the same all the time. If you have an A on one strand of your ladder here, on one of the strands, on the other side there will always be a T. If you have a T here on the other side, you would have an A. If you have a G, you would have a C, and so on. And that would never change. And the reason for this is very simply down to their shapes. I'm going to simplify this for the sake of this diagram. If this is what A looks like, then T fits in perfectly. And therefore G, which might look like this, doesn't fit. So A and T always go together, and G and C always go together. And there's a couple of phrases you can use to help you remember this. I like apple tart and chocolate gâteau. Choc gâteau. Oh, I think I've spelled that wrong. So A and T for apple tart and chocolate gâteau, C and G. You could also remember at the golf course. That's another way to try and remember how they're paired up. So it's really important that you try to remember that. So A always goes with T and G always goes with C. So we call this complementary base pairing. So let's have a little practice. So if I had a strand of DNA, and on this strand we had the letters, we had a G, C, 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 A. What do you think would be on the other side? So pause the video now. What letters do you think would be on the other side? Remembering our new rule, A and T always go together and G and C always go together. So pause the video now and have a go at that for me, please. Okay, hopefully you've all had a chance to have a go at that now. So G always goes with C. C always goes with G. C always goes with G again. And then another G, and then a T. Okay. This is a slightly fancier version of the one that I drew out. So it's the same question, but just presented slightly differently. So now what you've got is a strand of DNA. A strand of DNA that's got a G, C, sorry, a G, G, C, T, A, T, C, T, C. And all you need to do is see if you can do the other side of the strand to make this a complete double helix. So pause the video and have another go. Okay, hopefully everyone's figured that out. So we can see here we have G and C, G and C, C and G, T and A and T, T and A, C and G, T and A, and C and G. Okay, now at this point I'd like you to have a go at writing your own DNA strand. So come up with a strand that's about 10 bases long, write it out in your book, and then see if you can do what the other strand would look like. What's the complementary base pairing on the strand of DNA that you've done? So if this is my book, I might write A, T, G, A, C, G, A. That's about 10. And then on the other side, I might do my T, 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 A, G, T, G, C, T. That's all I want you to do. Doesn't matter what order of letters you pick, just as long as they are A, T, G or C. You could have a whole row of A's if you wanted. You could have half and half, doesn't really matter. And then have a go at doing the other side. So what do we now know? Let's do a quick recap of everything we have covered so far. So first of all, right at the beginning we spoke about how the genetic material is found in the nucleus. Okay, so that was our first point. And then we said that the nucleus contained chromosomes. And then we said the chromosomes are made from DNA. Okay, and then we focused on that DNA for a bit longer, and we said that DNA was made of DNA is made from two strands. We said that DNA, is a double helix. So if I just remind you, the DNA helix, a bit like that. Number 6, we said that DNA had bases, and there were 4 bases, A, T, G, and C. And our very last learning point, we said that A always goes with T, and G always goes with C. So we have covered a lot of material there. So all that's left for us to do now is to test our knowledge on a couple of questions. So on this page here, we've got 2 exam style questions. We've got one in the red box and one in the blue box. So what I'd like you to do is firstly have a read of the questions and then have a go at answering them. They're both quite short questions, only worth 2 marks. So pause the video now and give yourself about 5 minutes to have a go at them and jot the answers down in your book, and then we'll review them together in a moment. Okay, so let's have a look at that very first question in the red box. So the first question in the red box tells us that DNA is the genetic material of human cells. And it says figure 1 shows us the structure of part of a DNA molecule. It's an important point to notice that DNA is a molecule. Sometimes in questions it's also referred to as being a chemical. Examiners sometimes put that in there to throw you, but it all means the same in this situation. So it's just DNA. So the question says, figure 1 shows us the structure of part of the DNA molecule, and then we've got a lovely little diagram of our DNA molecule. Describe where the DNA is found in a human cell. This is a describe question. So if we think about what describe means, if you were to describe a post box, you would say that it was red, it was about 1.5 meters tall. It is say what you see. That's what describe means. So for 2 marks, what are we going to say about where it is found? So first of all, think back to right at the beginning, our very first learning point. We said that it is found in the nucleus. So it's found in the nucleus.
That's going to get you a mark. And then whereabouts in the nucleus would we find the DNA? Well, it would be found in structures called, and I'm hoping everyone's got this keyword, chromosomes. So in structures called chromosomes. So if you haven't got those answers, go back and make your corrections to your work so that when you come back and look at it again, you remember the correct answer. Okay, and let's now have a look at the blue question. So it's a similar question to last time. So first of all, in which part of an animal cell is DNA found? And complete the sentence. The letters A, C, G and C in the diagram represent 4 compounds called. Okay, so let's just think about, again, everything we've spoken about. Which part of the animal cell contains that DNA? So again, we're going to write the answer as being the nucleus. Okay, and then the letters A, C, G and C in the diagram represent 4 compounds called bases. So if you got both of those right, you would have got both marks. Okay, so again, make your corrections and improve them as you need to. Okay, so that is the end of the lesson on DNA. Re-watch it as you need to. So if you've got stuck in any parts, go back and listen to the information again. And if you're still stuck, please get in touch with your science teacher and they will be able to explain it a little bit further for you.